When we're talking about presuppositionalism, we're talking about proof, at least alleged proof. We're not talking about, well, here's my opinion on this. This is supposed to be an objective proof of the objective truth of God's existence. This is not some subjective thing. This is absolute certainty, 1000% proven. This is what is supposed to be the case with this argument. Set this up in your mind. All right, so here's the scene. A presuppositionalist arguing with a non-Christian. Now at first I'm going to take the non-Christian out of it and just make a silly illustration here. But imagine a guy walks into a church service and there's someone on the ground foaming at the mouth. Okay. And let's say that the Christian looks over and on the wall next to him there's a picture hanging on the wall. He turns and he looks and he says, "You can't account for this event, all right? But I can. You see, picture on the wall? This person is demon possessed. And that is what accounts for this foaming at the mouth here. And how do I know that they're demon possessed? Because if they weren't, they wouldn't be able to foam at the mouth." Let's take the silliness of the Christian talking to the picture on the wall out and change the illustration a little bit. Okay? Let's say that, oh, by the way, if you didn't catch the point of the guy talking to the picture, just because you're talking to someone and they can't answer your questions doesn't mean that your view of God is true. So I'm saying you might as well be talking to a picture on the wall, but it's irrelevant. The picture can't tell you anything, but that doesn't give any more probability to your explanation being correct. But imagine a doctor walks in alongside a Christian, and let's say he's a non-Christian, and he's a naturalist. And let's say that he gives a naturalistic explanation for this event. All right? And let's say the Christian says, well, no, that can't be, for whatever reason, That doesn't prove that his explanation is correct. It doesn't prove that the person is demon-possessed, does it? You see, just because you have a view which you think would make something intelligible, and you aren't aware of any other view that would also make it intelligible, doesn't mean that your view is right. The presuppositionalist argument boils down to this. The proof of the Christian God is that without him, you can't prove anything. You may have heard Cy ten Bruggencate or Eric Hovind or Greg Bahnsen say this. The proof of God's existence is that without him, you can't prove anything. Or the proof of the Christian God is that without him, it would be impossible to prove anything. It's a transcendental argument, an indirect argument. In other words, they're not going to fly up to heaven and say, here's God, right? It's not a direct or an empirical thing where you're going to go show, here's God, see him. Okay, they're trying to give an indirect argument. They're saying, look, we know that God exists because it's impossible that he doesn't. We can say that no other worldview can account for the intelligibility of human experience except the Christian worldview. Well, let's think about this statement. The proof of God's existence is that without him you can't prove anything. First, what is this alleged proof presupposing? That it's possible to prove things, right? Well, maybe we can't prove things. Maybe we can only disprove things. To say, I must have wings, because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to fly, is just begging the question. I mean, maybe I can't fly, right? Why should I assume that we can prove the existence of a being through some alleged logical argument? Not just a general concept of some all-powerful creator, but a very specific view of God. Why should I just assume, oh, okay, well, God must exist because if he didn't, I wouldn't be able to prove anything. I can show how something is internally inconsistent, therefore it's self-refuting. It fails on its own. Maybe we can do that, but maybe we can't show positively that some being that goes beyond the natural world, maybe we can't prove that type of thing through logical arguments. Even if the Christian God accounts for the intelligibility of human experience, I don't think he does, but even if he did, that doesn't mean that he exists. You can't go through every single view other than your particular Christian view and show it's impossible to account for human experience making any sense. It's impossible to account for it unless we presuppose this very specific view of God. Every other view out there, every possible conceivable view out there, is false. None of them can be true. The only one that accounts for human experience is the Christian God. This is just absurd. I mean, what a claim, right? Congratulations, you made another claim. You come on the scene, you make this huge claim about this guy who walked on water and did all these crazy things and claimed to be God and died on a cross and rose from the dead 3 days later. Making all these claims, right, that have nothing to do with my experience. You come on the scene, you claim all these things, and here you got another claim to add on top of that. No other worldview can account for the intelligibility of human experience except the Christian one. Now think about this. Doesn't arguing for God's existence put God on trial? You might have heard Sai say he doesn't present evidence to the unbeliever because he doesn't want to make the unbeliever a judge over God, and thus putting God on trial. Well, Sai, stop arguing for God's existence then. If we all know it, and if God is not to be put on trial, then just stop arguing about it, right? What are you adding to the alleged general revelation of God himself? You're putting God on trial, and you're giving this weird argument that I think is absurd, and then it just makes the unbeliever question, well, is that a good argument or not? So what's the point of presenting the argument when you're telling the unbeliever that he can't even trust his own mind? He cannot be autonomous, a law unto himself, right? You can't do that. You have to start with God. Well, if I have to start with God, then what is this argument doing? How can you get around trusting your own mind and beginning with yourself? How can you skip over yourself and say, I'm going to start with just presupposing this ancient tribal deity, Yahweh, the Lord of hosts. I'm going to start with him. That's like saying I'm going to begin on the freeway going 65 miles an hour. That's where I'm going to start. Just, I'm going 65 miles an hour. I'm not going to start the car and gradually get up to that and then get on the freeway and, go 65 miles an hour. I'm just going to start going 65 miles an hour right from the beginning. I'm just going to start with the Lord God of hosts. It's like, dude, what are you talking about? How do you get there? I mean, don't you have to start with assuming that your mind is reliable to even think about these issues, right? Anyways, so, you could stand next to a tree and show that the tree is not able to account for whatever you want to say that, that the tree has to account for. Why don't you just walk up to a picture on the wall and say, hey, you're wrong, and I have a theory. If you like this video, please click the like button and subscribe. If you want to actually discuss this with me, then feel free to send me a private message and we can talk about it. Peace.